Okay, let's do this. Housing. Let's keep it short and simple. Well, at least I'll try to. This video is going to be a general outline of what you need to expect when looking for housing in Rotterdam, specifically as a first-year international student. If this does not apply to you and you say, hey, I'm a second year, or hey, ik ben gewoon Nederlands, that's okay. This might still help you, but my overall advice is more tailored to first-year international students. For my new viewers, hi, welcome. My name's Milena. I make educational YouTube videos, and if you find this type of content helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe so that I know how many people are actually watching. Like from my last videos, 98% weren't subscribed. And I mean, if you found those other videos helpful, I can assure you that the videos to come will be even more helpful. So come on, help yourself out. Just subscribe. It'll do you good. And recently, I've been getting a lot of DMs through Instagram, and it's been amazing to be able to help people and talk to people who are coming from different countries. And if you are one of those people I've talked to till now, hi, welcome back. Knowing that these videos are helpful are really great and make me want to make more content so that I can help you out navigating your way into a new country. The thing is that everyone kind of asks the same type of question or a very similar one. So if you have a question, I urge you to just write it on the comments and let's see how many people have the same question. If I see sufficient people saying, hey, I had this question too, or enough people liking your comment, then I know what is on high demand. So let's start. Let's outline the basics. And today we'll be diving into two different types of accommodation. The reserved accommodation, which is organized by the university, and other accommodations that aren't directly connected to the university. With reserved accommodations, I mean accommodations that have a partnership with the university, specifically Erasmus University. The university knows that there's a lot of first-year students coming from different countries that might benefit from having some convenient housing available. The issue is that those type of housing only allow for 25% of the new first-year incoming students to actually live there. And that includes bachelor students, master students, and exchange students. So you can say it's quite competitive. And there are 3 requirements. You have to be a first-year international student, you can't have a Dutch nationality, and you have to be below the age of 30. And if you're thinking, I fit all these criterias, then these might be great options for you. And so the main ones I'd like to address is the SSH and SIOR, which both have accommodations on campus. For the SSH, if you Google search it, you'll find SSH's website, and they basically focus on student housing. They have housing all over the city, which means that you can be paired off with people from the university in different sections of the city, but the most popular one is the Hatta building. The Hatta building is quite literally centered in the heart of the university campus. It's right in front of the law building, and it's above the gym. You share a bathroom, a kitchen, and a toilet, but you have your own room, which gives you sufficient privacy if you're someone who's quite flexible. But okay, let's start with the pro. It's great for meeting new people. Specifically because everyone is a first-year student and international, it's a great opportunity for you to get to know different people and to interact with people that you might not have met during your course. It is to be noted that the Hatta building is great for extroverts. As I mentioned, it's conveniently on campus, which means that you can be extremely flexible with your hours. You can literally wake up 5 minutes before a lecture, and if you sprint, you'll get there on time. Another pro of living in the Hatta building in your first year is that it gives you time to get to know the city and look at your options more thoroughly. Some students, when they come to the Netherlands, they're faced with the urgent matter of finding housing, and they might rent out a room that is not of good quality and is actually not good for the price that it's set on. If you live in the Hatta building in your first year, it gives you a whole year to look at the city, look at your options, and potentially pick out the best accommodation possible in your second year. And the last pro would probably be that the Hatta building or other SSH housing are quite affordable. They're good for their price and usually of good quality because of how the SSH manages all their accommodations. But okay, let's look at the cons. There are limited spots. Basically, your chances of getting a spot in the Hatta building is equivalent to winning the Hunger Games. As I mentioned, they only take 25% of everyone. Your chances are low, but they're not zero. Here's the thing, you always start early. Look at the dates and look at the times that they are opening for registration and make sure you're one of the first people to apply. Another con, you might not know the city as well as someone who had lived in the city in their first year. Being on campus is great because of the convenience that it brings, but it also means that you're often limited to that campus environment. A lot of first-year international students end up not getting to know the city in their first year, which I honestly think is a big mistake. Rotterdam is great and it has a bunch of things and a lot of secrets that you need to know, which trains to take, which neighborhoods to go into and such. If you do go into an accommodation of the SSH in the city, that might be a better option for someone who would really like to get to know Rotterdam, the city, and Dutch culture. That's another con. Being in the Hatta building or in the SSH accommodation often limits the amount of contact you have with Dutch culture. You're surrounded by first-year international kids, and that's great because you get to know people around the world. But if you come to the Netherlands, it's great to know a little bit about Dutch culture. And if you're just surrounded by international people in your first year and you don't make the effort of getting to know Dutch people and culture outside of the housing, you might not learn as much about the Netherlands as you may wish. Listen, you'll miss out on a bunch of cool Dutch stuff. The last con would probably be that you don't know who you'll be paired with. Because you share the kitchen and the bathroom with 1 or 2 other people, you might be with someone who is extremely messy. And me, as a very clean person, I cannot deal with mess. And if you're also like me and you enjoy having a clean area, this might not be for you. So let's just say the SSH, great for extroverted people who are extremely flexible with others and who enjoy a lot of movement. They enjoy constantly meeting new people and running into strangers. I personally didn't live in the Hatta building my first year, but from what I've heard, they had great parties, great get-togethers, and if you're someone who enjoys those things, that might be something you might want to consider. And another reserved accommodation that you might want to consider is the Xur building, which is right next to the philosophy building, if I'm not mistaken. And similarly to the Hatta building or the SSH housing, it has similar pros. You get to meet new people. Great for extrovert. It's conveniently near campus. It gives you more time to find housing and it's usually at a reasonable price. The cons are also pretty similar. There are limited spots, so there's quite a lot of competition. You won't get to know the city as well. You might miss out on some Dutch culture. The only big difference between the Xur building and the Hatta building on campus is that the Xur building is your own room, your own bathroom, and your own kitchen. The Xur building might be great for an introverted person who is private, enjoys their own things, and enjoys the flexibility of being near the university, but it also still allows you to get to know people from the first year and make a lot of friends as well. And now we covered the main reserved accommodation that the university supports and has a partnership with. Now we'll look at other accommodations. We'll first start with different platforms, websites that you can use to try to find housing outside of the campus. You have Housing Anywhere, Room Plaza, and Kamernet. There are a bunch of others, but those are the main ones that I'll be talking about. The pros of using those kind of platforms is that you have a lot of options. Kamernet and Room Plaza basically give you a snippet of every different type of housing there might be. So if for you it is important to have a lot of options, those type of platforms might be something for you. Additionally, they're usually at affordable and reasonable prices. If you're an extremely flexible person and you know that you adapt well to any environment, it may be a great alternative for you to find a room through these platforms. And a very important pro from using those kind of platforms is that they usually check over housing and rooms to make sure that you're not going to get scammed. For someone who's coming to the Netherlands, you don't want to get scammed because if you did, I think you have other issues than housing. Okay, so those are the pros, but let's move to the cons. People have had a lot of problems with the fee. Whenever you pay the fee to get access to the website, I've met a lot of people who said, I paid the fee, but I didn't get access. And that is not something you want to hear because, to be honest, I don't know what the fee is, but you don't want to lose money either way. Another con is that you might be stuck with a room that has been overhyped. Maybe someone said, oh, it's great, it's luxurious, it's yada yada yada, but hey, anyone can take a good picture of a house, slap some plants there, throw a rug here, and here you go, you got a luxury room. But sometimes, and most often, that's not the case. An important thing is keep an eye on the energy type. See if it's A, B, C, or whatever. The further away from A, the worse it is, because that usually determines how the heating is in the apartment or the room. Coming to the Netherlands, you'll quickly find out that it is a cold country. If you don't have an apartment or a room that heats well, that might be an issue for someone coming from a warm country. And I come from Brazil. Dutch summer is Brazilian winter. Another con is that you might be put together with someone who doesn't go to the same university as you, or I don't even know, I'm quite sure there might be a chance that you are also put together with someone who isn't a student, or at least not a bachelor student, or someone your age. In that way, you might have much less in common with them, and it might be harder to have a great, roommate relationship. But hey, If you're someone who gets along with basically anyone, I don't see how that could be an issue. And another con is that if you're a clean person, you can't expect the person to have the same standards as you do. I had roommates my first year who didn't have the same cleaning standards as I did, and that made it extremely hard to get along. Things that I grew up doing, such as cleaning the room or the floor or the kitchen, were things that weren't common for them. So we had a lot of issues communicating what had to be done just because I had much higher cleaning standards than they did. Okay, and another alternative housing option is the student hotel. And I must tell you, the student hotel is the heaven of all student housings. I'm just gonna start with the cons. The only cons is that it's expensive and that there are limited spots. Because it's so great, everyone who has the means to wants to live there. So the pros, the rooms are spacious. If you go to their website, you'll see that it is literally a hotel. Another pro is even though you do have to share the kitchen, you get your own bathroom. And we love some privacy in the bathroom. And like the student housing on campus, you make a lot of international friends. Most people in the student hotel are first-year international students as well. Another pro of the student hotel, specifically in Rotterdam, it's that it's in the middle of the city. It's extremely close to important locations like Beurs or Blaak, which you'll find out about. In addition to that, the student hotel has multiple facilities, including a specific study area, a gym, there's a restaurant. And so just to break it down, if you're someone who comes from money, enjoys luxury and space, the student hotel is something for you. And so now with other accommodation, we also have to look at the private market. I consider the private market the market where people rent out their rooms or apartments on platforms that are not officially made for renting out rooms or apartments. In this case, we'll be looking at the gem, the secret of finding housing in Rotterdam or any city in the Netherlands is Facebook groups. If you go to Housing Rotterdam specifically, let me check. Housing Rotterdam, apartments and housing in Rotterdam. Every single day, people post new ads for rooms or studios or just whole apartments which are not available or seen in platforms like Kamernet or Room Plaza. So here are the pros. They're usually more affordable, but you can also see it as getting the best value for your money. Because a lot of people who post on these group chats are students who are just trying to find a fun roommate, you can be more certain that it's not just people who want to rent you out a terrible room just to make money, but it's actually people who want a good roommate. That's another pro. You'll not only be looking at the room you'll be living in, but also the people you live with. And that's extremely important. I cannot stress how important it is to get good roommates, to find people you actually click with. Because even though in the beginning you might feel like, oh, I can deal with anyone who comes my way, trust me, if you're not compatible as people with cleaning or organization, it starts to slowly fall apart after a while. Another pro, there are no sign-up fees. Usually you just have to write a little explanation on why you want to join the group, just so that they know that they're getting people who are actually interested in the housing market. Another pro is that those types of Facebook groups have immense diversity. If you find housing through these groups, it's more likely that you will actually live the Dutch student life. In most cases, you'll be more integrated in the city because it's usually people who are just looking for a new member. You're paired together with people who know the city, who've grown up there, or who maybe have more experience than you do. Okay, great. We talked about pros, so let's go to cons. It's hard to get accepted. A good accommodation might have up to like 100 reactions, which means that even though you might find a place that you love, the price is great, the location, the view and everything, if the people don't love you, the ones who are actually choosing who's gonna live with them, your chances are minimal. When I was looking for new roommates, I got around 50 messages, diverse people of various ages, and when it came down to it, I just chose someone who I thought was most compatible with me and the way that I live. And that's another thing. Don't sell yourself as someone that you're not. The first couple of roommates that I had were always telling me how clean they are and how much they love to have a clean and organized space. And I can assure you that they didn't. When the time came down to it, they didn't know how to do certain things they told me they didn't know how to do. And that made it extremely uncomfortable to live with someone who quite literally lied to me on the first day. Another con, as an international student, is that you'll quickly see a lot of posts that say no internationals. And those are usually houses of students who are just Dutch and would like to keep it a Dutch house. You might be hearing this and think that's discrimination. They can't just leave me out of a pool just because I'm international. And I fully understand your perspective, but there's also something you have to consider. These types of houses are usually composed by people who have a pure Dutch culture and speak Dutch as their first language. and you can't really judge someone for wanting to speak their first language at home. I can't blame them. I understand why they'd like to live with someone who speaks Dutch as their first language, and that's not everyone. I've met a lot of Dutch people who look for international roommates and are extremely open to speaking English at home. But there are a lot of houses that just prefer to keep it Dutch. So I'm just pointing this out so that you don't get surprised when you see no internationals on one of the ads. And probably the biggest con of finding your housing through Facebook groups is that you might get scammed. A new country and you're just trying to find housing. But here's the thing, a lot of people end up paying their first deposit or their first month up front before they even see the apartment. And usually scammers give the same excuse for not being able to be there for a viewing. It's usually, I'm not in the country or I'm not in the city. Here are some pictures. I feel like this gives you enough information about the apartment. And don't believe them. Luckily, the Facebook groups try to weed out all the scammers as early as possible, but there's always a chance that you might get scammed. So in general, just make sure that if you are going to rent a room, you have a viewing. You can be there, or someone you know can be there and check out the little things. You don't want to get to your room and to find out that the window doesn't open or that the bed isn't stable. Now we looked at the different types of accommodations available and looked at some of the pros and cons. Now I want to give you some tips when navigating through all these options. Number one is look for some place that is already furnished. You want a room that already has a bed frame or a table and chairs and probably a closet. You don't want to spend a lot of money in your first year really getting all the furniture in. Another thing which I find crucial is get to know the landlords. Why? Because you'll probably have maintenance that has to be done throughout the years. And if you have a landlord who clearly doesn't care about your comfort or even the quality of the room itself, you know that it's not someone you want to have to interact with for the next year. So while you're at it, look for someone who's nice and reliable and most importantly communicates things to you. And yes, that's a lot to consider the first time you meet someone, but it is essential that you know that the landlord will take care of you as a tenant. And another tip that literally no one talks about, which I think is extremely stupid because it's so important, is the fact that you should check if the people before you have deregistered from the apartment. Because if they don't deregister, there's only a maximum amount of people that can be registered into an apartment or a building. Which means that if there are too many people registered in the place where you are living, you can't register. And that causes a lot of problems. Because the only person that can deregister is the person itself. And since you don't know the previous tenant, you can't even contact them to let them know that they have to deregister. And if you can't register into the apartment, that means that you aren't legally in the Netherlands. And that's also another thing. Make sure that the previous tenants didn't leave you with a bunch of debt. You might be wondering, how would they leave you with debt? In some cases, if the previous tenants hadn't paid taxes or certain times of things that were due for the apartment, it transfers to the new tenants. Which means that if someone before you didn't pay for certain things, it might end up being your responsibility to pay for them. Especially because the value keeps getting higher and higher the longer you don't pay for it, you'll end up being pressured to pay for something that you had no relation to. Please keep that in mind. Registration and looking at what the previous tenant left for you is essential. And another tip is, yes, in the first year, enjoy the accommodation you're at. If it is the student hotel or the Hatta building, but make sure that you keep an eye on the market. A lot of first year students are so overwhelmed and joyful that they are in an apartment or in their own room their first year that they don't look at how the housing market is in the city. That means that after 1 year, when they're kicked out, they still have no idea how to find a proper room or a proper accommodation. Also, keep an eye on exclusive and inclusive when you're looking at prices. Exclusive means that it's not including all the utilities that you have to pay throughout the year. And these utilities may vary, like gas, it depends on how much you use. Whilst inclusive is inclusive to all these things and usually includes things like the Wi-Fi or those things that you use on a day-to-day basis. Don't mistake what is inclusive and exclusive with the taxes that you have to pay. When you're in the Netherlands, you have to pay certain taxes for the trash and the sewage system and such. Those things are not considered in the price of the room or the apartment. They are apart things, they're fully your responsibility, and you can't expect that to be something that is paid by the landlord. And the last tip I'll give for now is that you should watch out for near yada yada. And what that I mean is when they say near black or near the university. What people consider near in the Netherlands is relative. It's extremely relative. People love using the word near to try to sell you a specific location. Unless they give you it's specifically 100 meters or something from something, you can never really be sure what near means. And so those were some tips that I think are important for you to keep in mind. But I do have a lot of other tips that I'd love to share with you. Just let me know if you're interested in knowing them. And lastly, some tricks. A main trick for when you're messaging someone for accommodation is make your message creative. Make it spicy. Make it something different. Especially because you're most likely contacting your future roommates. Show them that you are the type of person that they would like to live with, not someone who's just dry. Another trick is to start early. Start looking as early as possible. The moment you know that you are accepted at the university, start looking for your search for accommodation. Because there are always people who start before you, and they're the ones who are going to get the best priced and the best located housing in the beginning. And also, if you are in the Facebook group, what you can always do is send a picture of yourself with some information. Hi, I'm this years old, I'm looking for a room, and this is my budget. And just set it out there. Because sometimes people who are looking for roommates usually just scroll and see if there's someone who they're compatible with, and they might actually reach out to you. There's honestly a very small chance of that just because there's already so much competition for rooms, but hey, you might as well try. If you got to the end of this video and you're still thinking you would like to know a little bit about different neighborhoods or cost of living, or even more tips and tricks that I could share to you about housing or living in Rotterdam or just being in the Netherlands overall, make sure to like and comment so that I know what you would like to see. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so in the case that I do answer your question, you see it as quickly as possible. But till then, take care!